Good afternoon, everybody. This is the third or fourth live stream that we do on the At Home with Streetwise page. Today is something quite special. We wanted to actually have a bit of an office conversation. We've been missing staying in our office, and so we thought we would invite a few people from our team, from our sister project, and actually have a bit of a light-hearted conversation about something that is quite serious usually, but actually I think we'll try and take it in a really fun way. So before we start, I'd like to introduce the rest of the team. So Talia.
Hi, I am Talia. I am a project coordinator for Stand Up, as Nathan said, Streetwise's sister project, and I co-facilitate with Zainab anti-discrimination workshops in mainstream schools. Just a little bit about myself, because Nathan asked us to kind of give a bit of background. I have been in Jewish education my whole life, primary and secondary, and then I went to university and still had quite a Jewish social life on campus, but obviously not a Jewish education, and then have been in this job ever since. So that's me.
What is ever since? How long have you been working for Stand Up?
Since October 2018, so about coming on a year and a half now.
Year and a half. Lovely. Zainab?
Hi everyone, I'm Zainab, Tali's other work half. I've been working for Stand Up for 2 years and a bit now. Nathan's asked us to speak a bit about ourselves, but that's possibly the most complicated aspect of who I am. So I'm going to try and summarize it in 2 minutes. So I'm a diaspora Arab. My parents are from the Middle East, particularly from the Gulf, and they moved here to the UK when I was 4 years old. I've been living here ever since. And in terms of educational upbringing, I started off in an Islamic Saudi school, and then later on moved to a mainstream school, went to university, graduated, and joined the stand-up team. So that's been a summary of my journey.
And you are not Jewish.
I'm not Jewish, as you can see.
Maybe giveaway.
You learn more about sort of what Stand Up do, but as an interfaith charity, I make up the Muslim half almost.
Brilliant. Ben?
I've got to follow that, Zainab. I'm very dull and boring compared to that. But hello, everybody. Again, you would have seen me before on our Home with Streetwise live. I am the Streetwise manager, and I'm coming up for 1 year in the job. At the end of May and end of next month will be my 1 year anniversary. So you can start getting your presents and gifts sent over to me. I am what I would describe as traditionally Jewish. So I have a very strong tradition in terms of my family background, very family orientated, but haven't ever been to a Jewish school in my school career. Went to mixed sort of secondary state schools and primary school. So a little bit of a different experience. Even my uni days mixed with a number of wides of different cultures and religions as well, and have throughout my career worked with many different religions, cultures and different people, and ended up at Streetwise working for Jewish schools and with Jewish schools, but very much the wider community as well.
Lovely, thank you. And just so you all know, I'm Nathan. I'm head of education at Maccabi GB, and I oversee the Streetwise project. And Streetwise started in 2005, and it started as very much a response to the need of young Jewish people to have support in a whole range of different personal development topics. Streetwise is a partnership between Maccabi GB and the CST, and since 2005, we've been delivering anti-Semitism education to mostly Jewish students in secondary schools, mostly Jewish secondary schools, but also lots of Jewish societies in mainstream schools and so on and so forth. And I think what is important to say is that Talia and Zainab are part of our Stand Up Education Against Discrimination project, which is the sister project of Streetwise. And it comes from, actually comes from an idea that we had in 2015 for our 10th anniversary, for Streetwise's 10th anniversary. And we we kind of decided that we wanted to bring anti-Semitism education in mainstream schools. And what we wanted to do was create an interfaith partnership where we would not only discuss anti-Semitism, but also bring in a conversation about anti-Muslim hate and discrimination in general. So we started discussing this at the end of 2015, and then in 2016 we piloted a program which received some government funding, and in January 2017 we started with the Stand Up Project. Stand Up Project, which has now been running for 3.5 years. It's seen over 24,000 young people across the whole country, and it's a brilliant project. And quite incidentally, the Stand Up team, which is now 4 people, moved into the Streetwise office just a few months ago, just 6 or 7 months ago. And since we have very much spent, well, aside from the last month, we used to spend almost every day discussing and debating all sorts of issues, usually with quite a lot of laughter and quite a lot of personal growth and learning from all aspects. Talia and Zainab wrote a brilliant article that was published on the standupeducation.org website a couple of weeks ago, which is about what they've learned about each other's cultures. And we, the Streetwise team, has not published anything like that yet, but it's published a whole range of other programs on anti-bullying and on body image and so on and so forth. And actually, I don't know where this idea comes from. I think Zainab or Talia, but we thought about what are stereotypical questions that we hear or that we've been asked as we were growing up, or that we hear in schools now. And I think what is really interesting is Talia's background is very different from Zainab's, which is also very different from Ben's. Just so you know, I'm Italian. I grew up in Florence. I was the only Jewish boy born in my year in Florence. I didn't have many Jewish friends growing up, and yet my family was quite Orthodox and quite Jewish. I never went to a Jewish school. I was the only Jew in my school throughout my life. And at the same time, I did lots of youth activities in Jewish youth movements. I also lived in Israel for a short period of time. I then studied in a Jewish institution in America. And for the last 10 years, I've been doing work with Streetwise in Jewish schools. So I think our background is really interesting in terms of our perception of what stereotypes there are. So I don't know who wants to go first. Zainab, you're going first.
Yeah.
What's a funny stereotype that you've heard about either the Jewish community or the Muslim community?
So firstly, just before I go ahead and discuss stereotype, I just want to say that it's lovely to see Streetwise and Stand Up join forces kind of online, because we usually work together offline. And most of these stereotypes that I will personally be discussing, and possibly the team as well, are either ones we've had growing up or in sessions that often kind of stem out of ignorance. So it's kind of brilliant to have this platform to address them today. So the first one I'll go for, only because it's the one I've heard about the most. And it was actually interesting because when I met a Jewish person, I was kind of looking out for is a big nose. So I've had it a lot growing up, and I know that it's alive and well still today, because in every single school Talia and I go into, when talking about stereotypes, that's the first thing that comes up. So do all Jews have a big nose?
Great question. I always have like students like stare at my face really intently in sessions, like, is it big? And I'm just like, you tell me, I don't know.
Can I ask you guys a question before we go to, I don't know if we have an answer, by the way, but what do you guys say about stereotypes when you ask young people about stereotypes, and then you kind of have to define what they are? Is it like there is some truth but not necessarily, or is it like made up things, or what do you guys say to young people when they ask about stereotypes?
So I think we first giggle quite a bit. And then often the stereotypes that come up have a historical point in which they stem from, but they are quite exaggerated. So it's about kind of redirecting the question towards the students. You know, you've heard the stereotype, do you know where it comes from? Some do, some don't, kind of tracing it back, and then talking about how it evolves or how it changes and how it's used today.
I also think there's like different levels of stereotypes. I don't know if people think this as well, that it's about the intention in which they're said and how they're said and how they are used. Some aren't as bad as others, just maybe they don't have links in really nasty historical tropes and they've been used to demonize or dehumanize a certain group. Maybe they just are a bit lighthearted and a bit funny, but I guess it's the way you start to use those stereotypes that can lead you down a slippery slope. If you say this, then you might say X as well. But I think it's a difficult one because we often say to students, we'll talk about a stereotype and they're like, yeah, but that is true. That is true. And they're like, you're not going to stand here and tell me that it isn't true. So I think it can be really difficult when we're trying to dispel myths, but also still kind of saying, well, yeah, that is kind of true, but shouldn't really say it. Or maybe like, it's that weird line of, can certain people joke about stereotypes, but other groups can't?
And some stereotypes, maybe sometimes stereotypes are good as well. And actually, why not be, proud of a specific trait or cultural reference? I don't know. Jews, big noses. Should we all do a profile? No, I don't think we should.
No.
No, we shouldn't.
I think it's interesting because, as I said in my intro, when I was growing up, people genuinely in my schools, non-Jewish schools, didn't know I was Jewish. It wasn't obvious necessarily. The only thing, and this isn't a sub-story, the only thing that possibly gave it away was possibly the size of my nose. And that's just natural. But again, it's not necessarily I wasn't bullied for it, or I wasn't criticized for it, or I wasn't picked out for it. But it was just when I eventually told people I was Jewish or whatever, I was off for High Holy Days or whatever, when I told my friends or whoever that I was not there, and they were like, oh, and then again, a little bit like Talia was saying before, you would see the extra stare at your nose a little bit, or your profile a little bit. But again, it wasn't used against me, if that makes sense.
I, out of many anti-Semitic stereotypes that got when I was growing up and in Italy mostly, I actually don't think I ever got the big nose. Maybe it is because it's a very it's mostly a stereotype that relates to the Ashkenazi community, and so Northern Europe or Northeastern Europe, or at least that's where it comes from. The vast majority of pseudoscientific studies, but actually out of loads of other very famous stereotypes that we'll talk about in a minute, I never got that one, which is kind of surprising.
I also think, Nathan, it might be, again, this is me stereotyping, but a stereotype I thought of Italian people growing up was also that they had fairly big noses.
Really?
Yes.
That's so funny.
So maybe that's why, I don't know.
I don't.
No, you don't.
Do you remember the moment when you learnt that this was a stereotype? So you hadn't heard it growing up, and then was there a point when you learnt that this was a stereotype, and then you were like, oh, that's really weird. Where does that come from? I've never heard that before.
I think I'm too old to remember this type of thing.
Fair. I think it's really interesting. I think from my perspective growing up, it was just used as banter, like in Jewish schools. Oh, you've got such a Jew nose, like, it's just used as banter without actually anyone taking the time to think about where the roots of that trope comes from, and kind of what ramifications it can have.
And I think what's really interesting is that actually it's one of those things that it seems to be quite lighthearted. It's a bit like the Jews have horns, and today people don't really believe it, or maybe they do, or some people surely do. But the roots of it are really sinister, and the roots of it are all about depicting Jewish people as monsters and like making really horrible representation of the Jew, who is there to terrorize and to kill children and to do lots of horrible things. And actually, if you think about it today with the rational mind of modernity, it's incredible that but 150 years ago, there were real scientists who were absolutely trusted and believed that would just create all these studies where there are entire books of studies that show how Jews were taken and actually their nose was measured, and actually the size of Actually, it's really interesting to learn about it. But enough with the serious stuff. Who's got something funny?
I do for Zainab, as we had just begun your month of Ramadan. I want to ask you, because I think this is a misconception, and also I just really want to know. During this month, do you actually not have anything to drink in the day? Do you not just have a cheeky snack? Do you not something like hidden somewhere you like go and have it without anyone seeing? Yeah, is that
just here.
Hiding snacks? Yeah. How does it work?
To answer your question, I couldn't have a cheeky snack even if I wanted to. And this fear stemmed from a very young age. So I started fasting when I was in year 2 or year 3. And it was really easy at the time because you would break your fast at 3 p.m. Whereas now it's at like 9 p.m.
Why has the times changed?
So it follows the lunar calendar. So it falls during a different time each year. So when I started fasting, as I said, like breaking fast was quite early. I'd finish school and I'd go home and I'd have a meal. But during, so at school, because I used to go to a Saudi school where all the students were Muslim and most were fasting, they would ask you to pull your tongue out. And if it wasn't white enough, it meant that you were cheating and you weren't fasting. And that was one of my biggest fears.
That was so funny.
And my tongue wasn't actually white at the time. So I was like, oh my God, if I pull it out, people are actually going to think I'm having a cheeky snack. So that's where my fear stemmed from. And I'd never actually thought about having a cheeky snack. And then, you know, when I left the school, I was like in year 9. So by that time, I understood what fasting was about. And I never really felt like I wanted to.
We won't get you to stick your tongue out now, Zainab, don't worry.
Yeah, I was worried you'd ask me to do that.
Isn't there something really interesting about, I mean, obviously, Zainab, you're one person, and I'm sure that 1.5 billion Muslims across the world respect and pardon? 1.8 billion Muslims. And I think individuals respect and practice fasting or Ramadan in slightly different ways, perhaps. Isn't it interesting that at least I know from my own experience, on Yom Kippur, which is a Jewish day of fasting, all we do is talk about food.
The whole day.
And actually, you've been quite clear about the fact that we really shouldn't do that.
No, it's not that you can't. I mean, you know, it's difficult because I don't work in an environment where everyone around me is Muslim. I mean, I work in a Jewish organization, but nevertheless, like even when I used to work in other jobs, people used to have lunch breaks. They used to talk about food because, you know, I personally enjoy talking about food, recipes, etc. I don't think it particularly makes me more hungry. And I think for me personally, Ramadan, it doesn't trigger hunger as much as it does like kind of, I worry about my energy levels the most. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I know that in Arab countries, all shops are shut until a certain time and you can't publicly eat in front of people, even though there are people who are unwell and can't fast, or there are youngsters. And I wonder why there are such strict rules, because personally, it's not something I struggle with. As I said, it doesn't make me more hungry. I think with Ramadan, you just come in with a mentality of what it's about, and it's not focused around the food as much as it is about kind of personal growth, empathy towards those who are less fortunate, etc. So I think once you know this, once these kind of values are instilled, that's the least that you worry about.
Really interesting. I guess in the countries where the shops do shut, it creates a spirit of what that month is about, and you kind of feel it in the streets as you walk down.
Absolutely.
I mean, sadly now a lot of shops are shut, so maybe you can feels like
that experience.
Everyone else is doing Ramadan, even though they're not. It's really interesting. Very cool.
Perfect.
Cool.
I mean, I might jump in with a question unless anyone else wants to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just again to put it out there, but again, a bit of a stereotype or a bit of a thing we talk about a lot in the office is around working in Jewish schools. Do all Jewish children go to Jewish schools? Pulling it out there, they must do, surely.
I mean, I fit the stereotype.
Do you guys get this question when you go to mainstream schools in London? Do you get that
all the time?
really?
I think, do you know what it is? It's about the air of mystery surrounding Jewish schools. The funniest for me is when I go into another faith school and they're just like, Jewish schools, what is that? And I'm like, guys, you're at a faith school. So it's exactly the same as what you're doing. They're not, they're still doing English, maths and science. They just might finish a little bit early on a Friday so they can get home in time for Shabbat, or have time off for Passover instead of Easter at that time of year. But I do think there's this air of mystery surrounding it, and maybe linked to also a perceived air of superiority as well. This idea that Jewish people only want to go to Jewish schools because they're better, or they think they're better than other people, or they want to be separate. Do you think it feeds into a lot of those ideas?
Is it important to respond to if you get the feeling that that's where the question is coming from? Do you respond to it? Do you answer it?
Yeah, definitely, because I think it's really important. A lot of the questions that we get will be surrounding the gates around Jewish schools. Why is there security guards? Why are there gates? And I think what's really important is that a lot of young people see that and either feel fear or they feel like, oh, we're not wanted. And those are two really strong emotions, feeling like scared, like why are there security guards, or feeling like you don't belong somewhere. I think it's really important. Zainab and I will always pick up on the tone of the question and have a chat about it and actually say, do you know why there are security guards at Jewish schools? Not just at Jewish schools, at Muslim schools, at mosques, synagogues, all different places of worship. Do you know why? Why do you think that is? Have you ever actually stopped to think about that and unpick those ideas? So yeah, we always do have those discussions.
And I think also the honest answer is, the obvious answer is no, they don't all go to Jewish schools. And I think Jewish schools have come a long way in terms of being part of wider society, so that it isn't just a Jewish school or Muslim school or Catholic school or whatever. It's school, and as Talia was saying, it's teaching young people about other religions. Yes, there's a focus on ethos, is basically what they call it now, an ethos around it, but actually it's ultimately still education. And I think Jewish students in non-Jewish schools equally are getting that education. And they're getting possibly, the argument used to be that they're getting a wider education, they're mixing with different people, different cultures, religions, backgrounds, whatever. But ultimately, it's also about what happens outside of school as well. So school is obviously part of it, and a huge part of it for young people growing up and their socialization. But also, I think it's also about your wider community. And I think Jewish students in Jewish schools are more open and now to get to know other cultures as well. And I'm sure it's the same for other faith schools as well. It's not just about your one faith or your one bubble, as we call it. It's about sort of engaging with other people as well, particularly in the world we live in now, where you have to know lots of different people, different cultures, to be able to move on through society, through on your career in university or apprenticeships or whatever it may be. I think that's important for young people to be aware of and to carry on doing as well. Sorry, I went very Nathan there, very serious. Sorry.
No, I agree. I think so I'm glad I'm the serious one. I think you're right. I think you're very right. I think there's probably about 70% of Jewish students in Britain that go to Jewish schools. And that's really interesting, because actually most of these schools have been created in the last 25 years. And actually there weren't as many 30 years ago, and it's all part of a communal movement towards Jewish education. I think it's really, really important. I think there's lots of research about Jewish education and about the benefits of Jewish schools. I think JPR, Institute for Jewish Policy and Research, has written a number of different really interesting studies about Jewish identity and how the effect of Jewish identity is, and what the effect of Jewish identity.
Oh. Nathan has just put his mic off. Do you want to just switch it back on?
You're muted.
There we go.
You're back.
I'm back?
Yeah.
You're back.
I'm still not getting it. Sorry. So there's a lot of studies about the impact of Jewish schools on Jewish identity. But I think what is also really interesting is that over the last 10 years, Jewish schools have made huge efforts in branching out and actually creating exchange programs and having exchange programs both with other faith schools and also other local schools. And I think we're part of that. We have a leadership program, which is the Alan Sennett Upstanders Leadership Program, which is exactly that. It is a leadership program for year 10s, which brings together 100 students from 10 different schools. 3 of these are Jewish. In fact, 4 of these are Jewish now. And the whole point of it is to bring young people together and learn for the benefit of community at the same time. And I think Jewish schools are absolutely incredible, both at the academic side of the national curriculum, at the Jewish studies side of the curriculum, and also, and probably more recently, at the interfaith and intercommunal side. Anybody has any other?
I do. So apart from kind of the kippah being a religious symbol, is it used for anything else? Perhaps hiding anything underneath, keeping stuff? Does it work like that?
Neither of you have one on now, so you can see what you're hiding underneath there.
Not a lot.
I don't wear one as an Orthodox woman. That's not something that I choose to do, but I know that my brothers and my dad do when they go to synagogue, and I've had loads of times people saying, are there horns underneath there, and what, like, money hidden underneath there, and what's that, which there are not, but yeah, there's definitely lots of rumours flying around this mysterious head covering.
Also,
yeah.
how does it sit on there? Because it looks like it could easily fall off. So if anyone's got any tricks on kind of how to keep it stable.
Depends how much hair you have.
You usually use a clip.
Yeah.
And actually, kids, there are kippot or yarmulkes for kids that have the clips on the inside, and there are also those that have Velcro on the inside. There's lots of clever methods. And Orthodox men would wear hats on top of the kippah, so that you're sure that your kippah doesn't fall off. Yeah.
Wait, like another hat on top of the kippah?
Yes.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Well,
I never knew that.
That's one of the reasons why you wear a hat. Yeah.
Oh.
We're all learning something new today. I want to ask a question. This is directed at both my Jewish and my Muslim colleagues. But can you speak English? Do you speak English? And do you speak another language? Obviously, we all speak English here, as has been demonstrated for the past while. But we get asked this a lot. Zainab, I get asked if I speak Hebrew a lot. Zainab will get asked if she knows how to speak English. So yeah, how do you respond to this question?
Only really fast. So I get comments on the speed a lot, especially by Natan here. I also get told I sound like Talia by my brothers and sisters.
My parents think that me and Zainab sound like the same person, so I don't know what that says about
my siblings say I sound Jewish now. I don't know what that means, but yes, I can speak English. My first language though is Arabic, because that's the first language I learned how to speak. It's my mother tongue. But yeah, can speak English, I guess. But I think,
where's that question rooted? Where's it rooted?
So I don't think they're essentially asking you, can you speak English, especially if you're kind of directly speaking at them. But I think, again, it goes back to this idea of either othering or kind of ideas of, not being from a certain place, etc. So obviously from where I come from around the world, English isn't the first language. It isn't even like regarded as a language in which people within the country speak, etc. And I think that kind of personally, when I get asked this question, especially in a session, Talia, as you said, I assess the tone. If it's generally asking, do you speak English, or if it's kind of referring back to ideas of not being from a certain place. But yeah, when I get told I'm not from a certain place, I'm not surprised. I still think these comments are shocking in 2020. But as I said at the start of this live stream, I have a dilemma in which where I'm from, my race, etc., and I'm still trying to unpick that. But at the same time, I'm really confident when speaking about kind of my loyalties, my belonging, what kind of communities I feel part from, and that includes the Britain and being British and being proud of that as well.
Ben, you don't have these problems.
I can speak a little bit of French, so does that help? I don't know if that counts. My French GCSE, and my French teacher would be proud if she's watching. But no, certainly, yeah, I mean, you're right, I don't have these problems. But although, again, when people know I'm Jewish, they ask me, actually, do you speak Israeli, which doesn't exist. But they then, when I say it's Hebrew, they say, do you speak? And I have I'm not nowhere near fluent at all in speaking Hebrew. I can read it if I need to, or I can learn it melodically, like the tunes we would hear in synagogue or whatever. I think like a lot of British Jews, possibly. But certainly, yeah, I don't have a problem with people second guessing what my first language may be once I've introduced myself, obviously.
I have quite an interesting. It's a question that I get a lot. Not so much about the English, but about where you're from and all that. And it's interesting because if I'm out on the street, I'm not visibly Jewish, really. I get very often, if somebody guesses where I'm from, they say Italy or France or Spain, and it's a Central European or Southern European type accent that I have. But actually, the question is really interesting because I do speak Hebrew, but I only speak Hebrew because I lived in Israel and I learned it there. I speak English because I learned English growing up. I'm Italian. Italian is my first language, and I also speak other languages. And when I was growing up in Italy, there was never a conversation about, do you speak Hebrew? And that is probably, or Israeli, as you said, and it's probably because there are so few Jews in Italy that actually it's quite rare to make the connection of, oh, you're an Italian boy that's playing football on, whichever football pitch. Why would I think that you're anything but Catholic, right? Why, there's no such thing as another religion unless you know. And then if you know and you are in school, then that becomes quite interesting. Often teachers used to ask me questions about either my culture or tradition, or about how things were said, or if you study literature and there's loads of references about the Bible, and can you read the Bible? I said, yeah, I can read the Bible. Because can you speak the Bible? Can you speak the Bible? Well, it's like,
are you a prophet?
Well, I might have, Nathan is a prophet in the Bible, but can you speak the Bible? Well, no, the Hebrew of the Bible is a bit different from modern Hebrew, but yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah, my name's always the dead giveaway that people ask me questions, because I am white, so I'm not perceived as someone who isn't British, because obviously like the default is white. But whenever I meet someone and I introduce myself, everyone always says, well, where's your name from? My name is Hebrew. And the second I say that, they're like, oh, are you from Israel? Have you lived in Israel? Were you born in Israel? Are you Israeli? And the answer is no. And I have I have visited Israel in my life, but I have no family living there. I speak Hebrew, similarly to Ben, from as the language of prayer as opposed to conversationally, which I think is very different. And yeah, it's an interesting one, because people always, then it goes down this rabbit hole of questioning with no real answer, because I was born here and just have a Hebrew name.
All right, thank you. I think we just touched on the very shallow surface of what stereotypes are, as we said, we were talking before this live stream. We were saying often we ask for anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim stereotypes in class, and often students in London would say, "Oh, Jews all drive big Toyotas," and we're saying, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Is that, or when students say Jews are all attached to money, and then you need to have a proper conversation about where that comes from, and we do. But what if somebody says, "Oh, Jews are all successful"? Is there a side of it that can be pride, and actually a community that thrives, and a community that strives to succeed? And I think that applies to all minority communities in this country, and I don't think there's anything negative to that. I think we're gonna I'm gonna ask my colleagues if anybody wants to add anything, and then anything, guys.
No, I think just that we are going to come back for a part 2, I think
Yes,
on Thursday. So please do leave comments on this video of any questions that you may have for either community, any points that you want us to touch upon next time, any things that you've been told growing up, any stereotypes that you've heard, and we can definitely unpick them next time.
And I would also say keep checking out the At Home with Streetwise page and Stand Up page as well, because all this week, as we do every day, we post lots of fun, exciting articles and worksheets and videos and signposting. So everybody who's watching, do check out both organisations, because it's been an absolute pleasure to mix the two together today, and we're looking forward to part 2 as well, which will be great.
Can't wait.
Definitely.
Lovely. Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See you next time. Bye-bye.